bill prompted by a KXAN investigation that would have modernized Texas's antiquated system for investigating deaths in the state did not become law during the 89th legislative session. This week, on Inside the Investigation, KXAN's Director of Investigations and Innovation, Josh Hinkle, explains how lawmakers who pushed for changes plan to keep the topic alive. Welcome to Inside the Investigation. I'm your host, Kelly Wiley, and today I'm joined by the head of our investigative team, Josh Hinkle. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so it's been about a month and a half, if I've got my math right, since the legislative session. How do you feel, first of all, not having to run around for that?
I know. We're about to head into a special session next week.
It never ends. Well, this year, a number of bills were considered that were actually prompted by our investigations, which I know we're always proud when we see any kind of impact that comes out of it. But one in particular was the Catalyst team's report on medical examiners. Give us the update on where that proposal stands now.
So this all stems to the Catalyst team's Hanging on Backbone Creek project that we came out with in November. And so in that project, we had spoken with Senator Tan Parker, who was looking at ways to expand the use of medical examiners in the state. Because if you recall, Texas doesn't have that many medical examiners. We have 254 counties. Most of them, all but 14 of them, don't have medical examiners. They use justices of the peace. And those are judges who have a lot of other duties in their courtroom to do also death inquests. They're the ones that have to go out to scenes like murders, suicides, accidents, anything that was an unattended death, and really just certify that death to say what happened and this is what needs to be written down on the record. There were concerns that because they have not as much training as forensic scientists, those physicians that are trained to be medical examiners, that there could be mistakes in the process, which is kind of what we found through decades of research that go all the way back to the 60s. So Tan Parker, in starting a new legislative session, wanted to introduce a bill that would have, like I said, expanded the use of medical examiners. And to do that, he was going to have to change the law that was tied to the population requirement for counties to establish a medical examiner office. And right now, counties only have to have 2.5 million people to be required to establish a medical examiner office. And there's not that many counties that have that many people in Texas. So some have been voluntarily doing it over the years, but to get that requirement to require more counties to actually get to that threshold sooner, he was proposing bringing that down to 1 million people. And so that means that counties that hit that population threshold a little faster would have had to start establishing a medical examiner office and figure out how they were going to budget for that. That was one of his big concerns also, is making sure that counties didn't feel like they were getting this like unfunded mandate and didn't have any options. So one option that he had, which happens right now in his home district in Tarrant County, there are 4 counties in that area that have formed a medical examiner district so they can share the cost and the resources. And what his bill would have done is actually codified that and made it written into law that said that counties can do that. If they are neighboring counties, they can pool resources, costs, and establish a medical examiner office itself. So this bill had a lot of support. It went all the way through the Senate. It went through the House committee that it was part of. It was approved there. And then it got to the last month of the legislative session. We were all kind of watching what's going to happen. If you ever pay attention to the legislative session, you know thousands of bills are introduced every year. They've only got 5 months to get through all of them. So at the end of the session, there's a big backlog usually, and there's some really tight deadlines, especially on the House side. So if they don't hit those deadlines, then some bills, even if they've traveled very far in the legislative process, like this one, could die. And that's what really happened with this one. I want you to take a look at the moment that that deadline hit that night. It was kind of poignant considering the topic that we're talking about today.
Mr. Speaker, I love it. Mr. Dutton, for what purpose? I have a message from the legislative Grim Reaper. Admit the Grim Reaper. Time for consideration of Senate bills on second reading on the Supplemental Daily House calendar has done expired.
So you can see there, it's kind of a funny moment for the lawmakers because they're all tired. They've been working nonstop, and at that point it was midnight, and so
Oh, wow.
there were several bills that didn't make it. It wasn't just this one. So, but I guarantee you, I was at home watching the web stream. I was texting our colleague Arzo Dos because she's been working on this story also, and we were biting our nails and just waiting and hoping. It was literally like maybe 10 bills away from getting that. And they were all going really, really, really fast. At that point, they're not even reading things clearly. They're just trying to like get through as many things as possible because the bills that are in line have a lot of support already. And it's just unfortunate that all that hard work kind of goes for nothing at the end of the legislative session.
And it's such a window. I mean, I've heard this saying a lot this legislative session is that it's easier for a bill to die than it is to pass. There's so many obstacles, even when it has a lot of support, which is why we often see them come back up year after year after year.
That's right. Yes, exactly. And we're thinking that this will probably happen with this bill as well. You know, if the players make it back into the legislature, some of them have to get reelected first. And, you know, there was the Senate author, which was Tan Parker, and several people that had signed onto that. It was, you know, unanimously approved over on the Senate side. And then on the House side, you had Representative Rafael Anchia, who was the House sponsor, also filed his own version of the bill that was identical. So I think that, you know, if those players are all in the legislature in 2027, oh my gosh, that feels like a long time away.
It does. It does.
But it's not that far. Then I think that this bill has a good chance of coming back up.
And in your story, you were talking about things that they want to do in the meantime. Lay that out for us.
Yeah, so I mentioned Representative Rafael Anchia. When we talked to him after he presented this bill before the House committee, the House subcommittee that it was before it got to that final stage, he talked about the fact that the nation has a shortage of medical examiners right now. We spoke with the National Association of Medical Examiners as part of this project. Their vice president, who is actually a former medical examiner in Texas, said that there are probably only about 700 to 800 actively practicing forensic pathologists, which is the scientific term for a medical examiner. People that have that specific training to do things like autopsies and a lot of the other forensics that go into investigating death nationwide, 700 to 800 people. So if you think about if there's a will to get all 254 counties in Texas a medical examiner, then there definitely is not enough people to hold that job. So one thing that Rafael Anchia wants to do is call for an interim charge to study the issue and figure out how can Texas incentivize those doctors who have that training to come to Texas to take this. And that might mean things like looking at medical examiner pay, medical examiner training in our medical schools here. It's not the same job that it was, you know, decades ago. It can be at times one of the costliest jobs in an entire county budget. Some counties pay their medical examiners more than any other employee. So if you have that training, which is a lot more than many of the other doctor's specialties, you could make a lot of money.
And you have some sound here from Representative Anchia where he talks about and makes promises in this interview. Let's listen to it right now.
I think that we should have an interim charge to look at this issue, to bring more medical examiners to the state. We just need more people who are specialized in this work, and creating an incentive program makes total sense.
And that's something you would take on?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'm thinking of your original reporting on this topic because I feel like you, Arzo, the entire Catalyst team, sometimes we can get so lost in the details of these bills and you forget who is impacted. But I thought you guys really did a great job of showing the families who are impacted by the system not being improved. And talk to us, remind us of the story of Danon Lewis.
Yeah, so this is really the story that got this entire project started. Even before we were really looking at the Justice of the Peace medical examiner issue, we just heard about this mystery that had existed in the town of Marble Falls for like almost 60 years. And it was this 13-year-old girl named Danon Lewis who was found hanging, had died in her family's shed behind her home. And it was ruled by the Justice of the Peace in Burnett County back in 1965 as an accident. And so that just never really did sit right with people who went to school with Daynon, her family members. You know, we interviewed so many of them for this story. Through that process, we figured out that a justice of the peace who didn't have a lot of medical training did this, and there were some other questionable certifications that he had made in other questionable deaths as well. So that's where we started realizing that this system exists everywhere in Texas. So these types of questions or these potential problems could exist anywhere in Texas. And it's relatively gone unchanged since the Justice of the Peace system was introduced in Texas 200 years ago. So that's why, you know, it's a bit of an antiquated process, and there's been a push to get more science, those doctors behind at least this aspect of what Justices of the Peace are largely doing through the process of investigating all of this. We spoke to the Justice of the Peace in Burnett County who holds the seat that is the same seat that the Justice of the Peace back in 1965 in Daynon Lewis's case had. We provided her with all of the evidence that we'd been able to gather, talked to her about the story. She actually filed for an amendment with the state to have Daynon Lewis's death certificate updated. And after some time, the state processed it, went through, and they actually changed the death certificate. So no longer does it say that Daynon Lewis's cause of death was an accident. It says now could not be determined. And while that still leaves a lot of answers about, you know, who might have been responsible for her death and how did it happen, at least it gives her family and her loved ones and her classmates that we spoke with a little bit of peace of mind knowing that Daynon didn't do this to herself. And it's kind of a way to honor her memory, just to let her know that they haven't forgotten about this and they still are talking about it all these days later. You know, after the bill went through, which they were honored that a bill was even sparked by a project that was relating to their loved one. You know, they were a little disappointed that the bill didn't go through, but they were very, very thankful about the other things that this had done, including the death certificate update and just the awareness that it's brought to the issue. And they're hopeful that, you know, this will come back up again next legislative session, and so are we.
Well, I'll be watching out for the updates on this. There's been so many interesting revelations about how this system works, and I know you guys are going to continue to update this awesome reporting. Josh, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you.
Well, we release a new episode every Friday morning on the KXAN Investigates podcast. You can also watch us on our KXAN Plus app, which is available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. I'm Kelly Wiley. We'll see you next time.